Over the last 15 years of being a venture capitalist, I have reviewed hundreds, potentially thousands of pitch decks. Not only that, I've worked with entrepreneurs and helped them refine their pitch decks and really hone them, and then they've gone on to raise tens of millions and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars. I also have taught hundreds of students on how to evaluate pitch decks. And lastly, I've also been invited to speak at numerous conferences across the country on how to put together a killer pitch deck. And so I thought it might be valuable for you if I share some of those same tips that I've shared with countless entrepreneurs and students across the country. What I've done is I put together a multi-part series because frankly, it would be too hard for me to tell you exactly how to craft the best, most perfect pitch deck in just a 10 to 15 minute video. And so I've got a series of videos coming out where we'll dive in and we'll talk about how to build a great pitch deck. In these series of videos, I'm going to use the same slide deck that I put together to train hundreds of others at various different conferences across the country. So I'm going to be referring to it throughout the presentation. The first thing before you ever even open up PowerPoint is to get yourself in the venture capitalist mindset. Just like any sort of sales process, you want to be in the client's mind, right? You want to think like they think, you want to know what's going to drive them emotionally, whatever it takes, right? And so the first things that I'm going to talk about in this video today are how to get into a VC's mind. Now, in my opinion, there are basically four things. The first is understanding risk, reward, and valuation. I think sometimes entrepreneurs don't fully appreciate how a VC is thinking about those different things when evaluating a startup. The next is you want to send the right signal because, VCs, they look at lots of deals. There are asymmetries in information, and they're trying to use signaling to tease out which of the companies that they're investing in or meeting with have the best potential for long-term success. The next one is building FOMO. Now, FOMO is a real thing in venture capital. Sometimes we get teased about it a lot, but there are some real important structural reasons why FOMO exists and why it actually matters. And then the last one is being able to tell a story. Now, I can't tell you how many presentations I've sat through where I'm falling asleep by the end of it, and the entrepreneur has failed to really bring me in and get me emotionally attached, right? We all love stories, so you got to be thinking about how do you tell your story to create an emotional impact. All right, so let's dive into each one of these. All right, so the first one is this idea of risk, reward, and valuation. Now, here's the funny thing about being a venture capitalist. Most VCs are actually pretty risk averse. Now, I don't mean that risk averse in terms of we keep all of our money under our mattress, but in terms of compared to a founder, right? If you think about it, a founder's all my eggs in this one basket. I'm all in, all the chips in the table, right? VCs are a lot more careful than that because for one, they're managing other people's money. And so they have this fiduciary responsibility to drive as good of returns as they can and hopefully not lose their money. And so they don't put all their chips into one basket. They take their chips and they spread them out across multiple investments. Well, the same thing is happening when they evaluate your startup. They're thinking through the risk reward that's occurring, right? And so you as a founder, you need to be able to communicate to the VC that you are doing everything you can to de-risk your company. Because the more you can de-risk it, the higher the valuation is. And the reason for that is because if you can de-risk your business, you are subsequently, hopefully, increasing the probability that you will be successful, or at a minimum, decreasing the likelihood that you'll fail, right? And so the more that you can demonstrate to the VC, yes, we are de-risking this thing across the board, the more likely it is that the VC will pay you a higher valuation when they invest in your company. Now, what are things you could do to de-risk your business? Well, it might be that you go out and you get customers, right, before you ever raise any money. It might be that you bring on an incredible industry expert, right, that's just phenomenal at what they do, and you convince them to quit their job, at Google or Facebook or whatever, and give up their big salary and their big title and come join your little startup, right? That would be an indicator oh, hey, there must be something really special here. That's one. And two, they've gotten somebody who really knows what they're doing to come in and join the company and help. And because of that, that's helped de-risk it, right? There are a lot of different things you could do. So you should be thinking, One, how do you de-risk your business? But two, how do you show the VC that you have de-risked the company as much as possible? The next thing is signaling. Now, the thing with signaling is that, like I said earlier, VCs operate in an industry and an investing environment where there are extreme asymmetries in information. What do I mean by that? Well, you know your company as a founder much better than I will ever know as a venture capitalist, right? Even if I sit on your board and I meet with you all the time, you are still going to know far more about it than I ever will. And so I am at a bit of a disadvantage. Now, it cuts both ways because VCs, we do deals all the time. And so we have, compared to entrepreneurs who will only raise money a handful of times in their life, VCs will make, tons and tens, hundreds of investments over their lifetime. And so they have a little bit of an edge when it comes to negotiating, but they have a massive disadvantage when it comes to information and information about your company and your market and all of those things. And so what you do as a VC to kind of overcome that is you look for signals. You look for signals that indicate like this company has what it takes to be successful. So my point here is everything you do is going to send a signal of quality or lack of quality, frankly. And think about it like dating. When you're first dating somebody, right, you don't know all their baggage yet, right? You don't know the good, the bad, anything. And so you start looking for little signals about them that help communicate whether or not you're going to be a compatible fit. And the same thing is happening with VCs. So one of the big mistakes that I see a lot of founders make, for example, is they don't put enough time and attention into creating a really great pitch deck. And maybe there's spelling errors, or they don't have somebody help them go over it, or they don't have good design in their deck, right? And it's not that like any of those things really matter a ton in terms of the long-term success of your business, but if you have a very nice polished deck, it probably communicates that like, hey, you are a very polished individual, and you'll have an easier time communicating and selling, and it just signals like all these additional things. So like think about like every slide and what signal you're trying to send. It could be like what kind of advisors you have. It could be what kind of people you have on the management team. It could be what's your growth like of revenue, right? For example. And so you want to be able to highlight certain things that signal strength and quality. Because as a VC, like I'm making decisions super fast. I don't have all the information, and I'm going to anchor on some of those signals to help me make a decision one way or the other. The next one is FOMOs. Now, a lot of people joke that VCs are like lemmings, like nobody gets excited until somebody else is excited about it, and then everybody's like trying to bundle on and get in and so forth. And look, like on the one hand, it's sad but true. Like VCs tend to invest in general trends together. They get excited about specific companies, sometimes when it's kind of silly to do that. But the reason why it matters is that capital really can be a differentiator, especially in the early days for a company to really grow and achieve success, right? Like if one company can outspend all of their competitors on marketing, they're going to be able to get in front of a lot more customers a lot faster and get ahead of them. And so if a company is able to build a ton of FOMO, a fear of missing out, then they're going to be able to raise more money. And if they can raise more money, then it increases the likelihood that they're going to be successful, right? Remember my conversation on risk and reward and reducing the risk? Well, if you raise a lot of money, you're going to reduce risk of failure, right? And so VCs see that. And so then it's like, okay, not only must other people see something special and interesting, and so I want to sit up and see what I might have missed, but it also is like, hey, this company's really good at fundraising. That's going to give them an edge. That increases my desire to potentially invest in the company. The other thing to remember is, as Mark Andreessen points out, there's only a handful of deals every year that matter. And so you need to be able to communicate to VCs that you are one of those deals. Like if a VC's sole job is to make sure that they are an investor and one of the winners for that year, your job as an entrepreneur is one, be one of those winners, and two, communicate to venture capitalists when you're fundraising that you are one of those winners. And if you can do that effectively, you will build FOMO, because VCs, they won't care so much about valuation. What they'll care about is they don't want to miss out on that one winner because they know that one winner could drive massive home run returns for them. The next thing I want to talk about is stories. So even if you signal all the right things and you demonstrate how you've lowered the risk and you're building FOMO, if you don't make it interesting, nobody's going to care. They're not going to remember who you are. So just like all good stories have a beginning, a conflict, a resolution, you should be thinking about it in a similar tone, right? Start with your story, right? Talk about the pain point, and then your product and your solution becomes the resolution. And then what you're hoping for is that the VC can see the long-term resolution, which is your vision on how your company can have a massive impact, generate huge returns, and move society forward ultimately, right? So make sure you spend some time really honing in on the story and making it engaging and ideally even emotional, right? Going back to that FOMO piece, great entrepreneurs, I feel are able to communicate and articulate this amazing vision of the future and get VCs to emotionally buy in to that vision and get excited about what you're building. At the end of the day, your pitch book needs to do one of two things. It either needs to get you to the next meeting where you enter into full due diligence, or it needs to get you a quick no. So think about that as you're preparing it, right? How can I use my pitch deck to either convince investors hey, this is not for us, we're out, quick no, right? Save you a ton of time and energy. Or yes, this is very much in line with the type of things we like to invest in, and we want to move forward and dive into deeper diligence. That's it. That's what your pitch deck has to do. In order to do that, you need to be able to communicate the inevitability of your success, right? Lower that risk. You need to be able to generate excitement and FOMO and ultimately tell your story and communicate your vision. I hope this is helpful. Please stay tuned for my other videos where we're going to dive into more details around crafting a killer pitch deck. And I'll go through the full structure and everything else you need to know. And in the meantime, go check out my other video where I talk about how to give a really good elevator pitch. Thanks.